Hello, welcome to today's webinar. So my name is Claudia Holy. I'm the founder and managing director of Podymos, one of the few agencies that focus solely on medical device. So today's webinar is all about NICE and what the impacts of NICE are on marketing. So I have a fantastic panel here to discuss this, which I'll introduce shortly. But I first of all want to go through what the goals of the webinar are. So really we want to answer as many questions as possible about NICE and its impact on marketing. But to do this, I really need you to ask as many questions as you have. We do have a question and answer section, so please add as many questions as you have. We will answer them as we go. Alternatively, we will answer any remaining ones at the end of the session. So moving on to my panel. So first, I'd like to introduce Paul Dimmock. Paul is the HA advisor at NICE and lead for devices, diagnostics and digital entry at NICE. So we'll be able to share an awful lot of information around the programs that NICE offers. Next, we have Mike Branagan-Harris, CEO of Device Access. Mike and his team have taken over 50 technologies through the NICE program and have been responsible for over half of devices on the MedTech funding mandate. So welcome, Mike. Welcome, Paul.
Hi.
Next, we have Christopher Pomfrett. Chris is the MedTech Evidence and Technical Director at Device Access and former technical advisor at NICE. And finally, we have Becca Brady. Becca is Senior Account Manager at Podymos, and she's here to discuss the impacts of NICE on marketing on the product lifecycle, but also the difference between NICE and how it impacts the EU MDR or EMDR versus NICE. So I'd like to start straight away. I'd like to start with a very simple question to start off with, and I think this will probably be directed at Paul, and then I'll come to Chris and Mike. Who is NICE and what technologies are NICE interested in?
Hi, Claudia. Thanks very much for the intro. NICE is the essentially the regulator for getting technologies into the NHS. So these technologies would include drugs, and my particular area are devices, diagnostics, and digital technologies involved in the treatment of patients. So these would be typically classed as medical devices under the MDR. We advise the NHS on what to use, how to use it, and what is cost effective across the NHS and the different NHS pathways. And we are very specifically aimed at the NHS in England and Wales only for some technologies, but we do work very closely with Wales and Scotland. So we're very interested in NHS pathways, not necessarily whether a device would work everywhere in the world. We're very interested in making sure that the NHS gets innovative technologies, especially in MedTech. And we are essentially the place to come for all drugs. All drugs come through NICE and go before they use the NHS. It's not the case for devices, diagnostics and digital. You can come to NICE, and some technologies do end up at NICE, but you don't have to come to NICE, so you can still be used in the NHS without NICE input. But often and increasingly, the NHS will want a view from NICE before you start using technologies in the NHS.
And what particularly types of devices are the NICE looking at the moment?
We're looking at all different types of devices. We're very big on digital at the moment, obviously, because there are a lot of digital technologies around, but we will look at all technologies from extremely invasive class 3 technologies that are maybe implanted in the body, right the way through to apps and things that you might not necessarily think as a medical device. We will look at those as well to see if they're effective clinically, so they do what they say, and are they cost effective as well for the NHS when used in NHS pathways.
Okay, and we can run through a little bit about the programs later and how you actually access NICE and which pathways you could potentially go through. Yeah. Mike, do you have anything to add to that answer?
So who's NICE? Well, NICE is NICE. I've been had the pleasure of working closely with NICE for many years. In fact, when I started Device Access up in 2010, NICE were just starting their, focusing on MedTech, which is great. So, but no, a great organisation. Always found it easy to work with. In fact, obviously, I've known Paul for a long time. Chris, I knew on the other side of the table. Now he's joined us this year, which is great. But what tech is NICE interested in is a thing that we're quite aligned with. I mean, I've just come back from the US where I've been trying to find things that I think NICE and the NHS will be interested in. But, you know, if you look at the things that have been very successful, generally for us and for our clients, are ones that have reduced length of stay, been less invasive, faster recovery for patients. So in essence, you know, good for patients, good for care providers in efficiency, length of stay reduction, good for the payer being cost effective, or, you know, cost saving, and you know, good for those companies that have, you know, some of our clients got NICE recommendation that's led to coverage in the United States. That's how powerful NICE are. So they're very very respected organization. Everybody knows who they are, and yeah, that's my view on who NICE is and what they're looking for.
Great. Chris?
I agree with everything that Paul and Mike has said. In addition, NICE's products are second to none internationally. They're produced to very high standards. The decision making is done by independent panels, not NICE itself. So the decisions are reasoned, and they have good evidence to back them up. And if you get NICE guidance as a marketing tool, it's excellent, because you can then point to the NICE guidance on the NICE website. NICE comms allow reproduction of the whole guidance, and it's really free Marcom. And it is very high quality and world renowned. The other thing is that the NICE guidance is also reviewed regularly, so it's kept up to date. And I used to be one of the team of managers actually managing guidance review, guidance update, so I know how stringent that is. And so if somebody gets NICE guidance and takes it to the NHS knows it's right.
Yes. And so, and actually we'll talk about that a little bit later, about the difference between national and local market access, and the impact that has from a marketing perspective, but really what NICE offers from that. Excellent. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is go through the NICE programs, because I think it'd be great just to understand exactly how you access NICE, what programs NICE offers, and what's appropriate for different companies. So let me just share my screen. Excellent. So Paul, can I come to you first? Because I really want to just, you know, the audience to understand what medical technology evaluation program is, and how people travel through it. You know, do companies decide which pathway they want to go through, or how does this actually practically work if somebody wants to take a product through NICE?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Typically, you don't decide yourself which program you're going to go through, but there will be a discussion at some point. So we don't just impose it, but we have really well-established rules for which program you go into. Typically, if you're not a medicine, so if you're digital device diagnostic, you would come through to my area, and we work with a topic selection oversight panel, which includes all the big hitters from NICE. So that will have TA, MTEP, guidelines, everyone from NICE on that, as well as NHS England, as well as clinical commissioning, as well as the Department of Health and Social Care. So it's a one-stop shop, essentially. Nobody in that room can say, oh, let's see what somebody else thinks. We tend all to be there. So it's quite a powerful group to make those decisions. Typically when technologies come to us, and we've got a new source of topics at the moment, the NHS Innovation Service. We used to have Health Tech Connect. It's changed to the NHS Innovation Service, so do look that up. That's, again, it's a sort of a one-stop shop to find places to help get your technology adopted through the UK. Typically, we make a very light touch decision initially, should we do an output for a typical technology? And the first output would be a MedTech innovation briefing. This is a NICE advice product. So it appears on the website. It does not tell the NHS what to do, but it does give a snapshot of your technology, where it will sit in the NHS, and where it might go on after that. After you've got your MedTech innovation briefing, the topic will go back to topic selection, and there will be various places where we might produce guidance. Again, this is a permissive process. If you don't want to do that, we won't force you through to guidance. It's we want to produce guidance on new technologies, so we would prefer you to go forward for guidance. But obviously there are some implications. Some technologies may be not ready to go through that guidance step. Typically, if you're a device, you'll go through the medical technologies guidance. Traditionally, this has been for cost-saving technologies, but NICE are now looking at all their methods, so we're trying to get out of this silo mentality. of right, if it's a device and it's cost saving, it goes to MedTech. We're trying to do where the best value lies for different technologies. But as we've got the 4 silos on there, I'll talk through them there. They do describe the options very clearly. If your technology is invasive or involves electromagnetic radiation, for instance, it might require interventional procedure guidance. That's on classes of technology, so it's sort of on a procedure. Sometimes those procedures will only involve one device, sometimes they'll involve several devices, and we will require clearance that it's safe and efficacious. They do not look at costs at all. Often the technologies we get are covered by one of the established IPGs, so it's not always necessary to go through that. If your technology is monitoring or diagnosing, it could go to diagnostic guidance. If it's not, it'll come to MedTech. Typically ours are cost neutral or cost saving, but we have a new angle now that we can put things through a technology appraisal, which is quite a big deal because the technology appraisal carries with it a funding mandate, so it would get funded. I think Mike and his team have got one of the first ones we're taking through under that new process. What we're doing is we're using technology appraisals methods, but using the Medical Technologies Committee, because technology appraisal committees are used to drugs, and drugs and devices are just very, very different things. The evidence is very different. The speed the technology develops is very different. So it's just a very different area. So we found that we need people who appreciate what devices are, what the evidence around them are. If it's a diagnostic guidance, it would go through diagnostics. Diagnostics guidances tend to involve multiple technologies because typically a guidance for a typical diagnostic will be more than one diagnostic out there. So they want to look at them all together. Some of the processes require you to put a submission in for economics and clinical efficacy. For diagnostics, you wouldn't. They would do all their own searches. So the typical life cycle for a device is you would come to NICE, we would look at it. If it's got regulatory approval from the MHRA or MDR, that's fine. If it's got some evidence, we can evaluate it. You'd come through, we'd look at it, develop a MedTech innovation briefing. That's a very consultative process. We work with you. We won't put anything in that you don't want in there. So you do get to work with us on that. Once you've got that, what sometimes happens is you might want to go away and get some more evidence, but you can use the MedTech innovation briefing. For instance, one of the things that often happens with technologies is you get your technology, it's regulated, you start using it, early adopters are really keen, they take it up, fantastic. Yeah. You then think, right, we'll start doing some marketing on this, we'll get this used further in the NHS, and you might get well, NICE haven't said anything. So the MedTech innovation briefing is a good way to get into the sort of NICE environment without having a full guidance, because the full guidance can be quite involved, can be quite expensive. You might need to get a very detailed economic model. So the MedTech innovation briefing is a way of getting new innovative technologies taken up across the NHS. You can use that. I often see them in supplements in Sunday newspapers. Somebody will have a technology and they'll say, right, we've got a MedTech innovation briefing. Here it is on the NICE website. So you can immediately diffuse any sort of barriers to take up, to say, oh, well, NICE haven't said anything about it. It's on there. It's ready to go. As you build up more and more evidence, you might come back after you've had your MedTech innovation briefing, and then we take it forward to look at different sorts of guidance. So typically for as I say, for devices, you would typically go to MedTech to get an MTG, and there are some options whether we route that to technology appraisals as well.
And how do you get into the topic selection panel, oversight panel to start off with?
Typically you go to NHSIS, the Innovation Service. Yes. You can also come straight to us, email NICE or email mibs@nice.org.uk or email myself and we can have a chat. We will often have a discussion with people around what the different aspects of NICE guidance might be, where you might go to, whether you're ready to come through to NICE, what the regulatory requirements are, what different aspects of the evidence you might need. We're always open to discuss options with developers. We also have fee-based programs offered for market access. The Accelerated Access Collaboration and NICE Scientific Advice offer fee-paying services that will help you maybe develop your evidence, develop an economic model, or talk about the different routes you could get through to come to NICE to get some guidance?
Mike, what other routes sort of can people come to you to support to get through a MedTech evaluation program as well?
Yeah, well, what we've been doing a lot, and certainly since Chris has been on board, is helping to ensure that companies are ready for NICE and making sure that they have everything lined up in a way that Paul and his team can process it properly, particularly around the economic modelling, ensuring that they can answer the PICO question, which is asked on the form: population, intervention, comparator, and outcome. So who's this device for? What happens today are two big key questions that NICE and his team will want to know about when they're evaluating new technologies. So a lot of that work is done in understanding the population comparator, modelling, and then we can submit directly into Paul and have some informal calls as well. But it's making sure these companies are ready, and also the work we're doing at the moment is those companies that have not managed to go through NICE for whatever reason, we're able to help and advise them with Chris's expertise in ensuring they do get the evidence right, and they they repackage their proposition to NICE properly.
Great. So from a marketing perspective, this looks all fantastic. We go through the program, we get a recommendation. What are actually the impacts to a marketing team, to medical device companies, if they get NICE recommendation? Chris, I know you touched on this at the beginning about an independent appraisal. What other benefits are there to marketing teams?
With regard to market strategy, what Paul touched on, but something that I'm seeing a lot of, is crossing the chasm into majority sale. You've got your early adopters who are great advocates, and they could well be the experts who NICE speak to actually make sure that this device works in the way that the evidence supports. But it's taking that NICE guidance and then using it to get into majority sales across the chasm, because so many technologies fail in getting into majority sale. I was a MedTech inventor before I joined NICE. I worked in the NHS for 20 years, and I had 4 inventions, but none of them crossed the chasm. And I didn't go through NICE. NICE MedTech didn't exist in those days. And so it's a very useful instrument to be able to get you through that. And again, because of the ongoing maintenance of the guidance, again, the NHS knows that, okay, this technology's been around for a while, but it's still got positive NICE guidance. So that is a message to the NHS that it's still innovative, it's still useful. And so it's maintaining your presence all the way through your product life cycle of marketing. It's actually giving you a continuous boost. So it is something that is very valuable all through the life cycle of a product. The other thing that NICE can do with the guidance is modify the guidance, amend or update it to include your new version. And this has happened several times at NICE, where an earlier version gets positive guidance, and then as you roll out a new version, NICE look at the new evidence for the new version, the enhanced one, and then amend the guidance or update the guidance completely in some cases, and it's bright and shiny. If it's updated, it's a new number. The old number gets airbrushed off the website and disappears, and the bright, shiny new guidance appears. So it's an ongoing relationship that you have with NICE. And it's the marketing tool that, once you've made your initial investment, keeps on rewarding you for very little continued outlay.
That, I think, is extremely true. Becca, I know we've seen this in our experience. What are your thoughts around that?
I think that having NICE guidance is something that's so vital for your sales reps when they go in to speak to doctors, because doctors know that NICE is independent. They know that it's really looking at your data in a really robust way, and if they say this is a good product and it claims are supported by strong, robust evidence, the doctors know that's true, and I think that holds a lot of value for them. So having that NICE recommendation is a really vital tool, I think, for those conversations.
Mike, you raised your hand.
I was just going to say, for many of our clients going into hospitals with new technologies, they expect the doctor to complete what's known as a business plan to get the device approved for use. And one of the key questions in the business plan that's a standard template across most NHS hospitals is, what do NICE think about this technology? So, you know, talk about its effect on marketing, but it's actually part of the process of approval in many hospitals.
I think one of the, and Chris, you obviously spoke about this from a data perspective, an independent review. I think, you know, when you do go through NICE as well, it's validated, as you say, on a national level, which means you don't then need to justify your evidence on a local level within every single hospital. And I think that's sometimes something that's missed, because you may have excellent data, but if you have to justify it every single hospital, that's a really time-consuming activity, and you're not going to, you know, gain buy-in every single time. Whereas if you have national support for your data, and you show that it's cost effective and it's clinically beneficial to patients and the NHS, it totally changes the conversation. So I think that's a really important thing. I think one thing we also see when it comes to NICE approvals, it actually comes back to intended purpose. You know, when you do your whole UKCA submission and EU MDR, of course, it's going to be more important for UKCA moving forward with NICE. But if you don't have the right claims in your intended purpose, NICE can't look at those claims. So, you know, from our perspective as well, when we're looking, I'd be interested to hear what everybody else thinks about this. You really need to start planning NICE into your product life cycle and your clinical development plan, because it's not something that you suddenly think about. You need to start thinking about NICE very early on in part of your marketing strategy and your market access strategy, because it'll differentiate you in the market and give you huge advantages. Exactly the same as if you effectively plan your intended purpose development in the UKCA and EU MDR. Mike, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, nothing to add. I think you've covered that, you know, very, very well. Just to back really the power of NICE and you know, getting these you know, NICE approval is it can have a dramatic effect on the value of companies.
So one question we get asked quite a lot, or we hear quite a lot, is what are the, and I know somebody just asked this actually, and Mike, you've answered it, but it'd be great to answer it live. So what are the different levels of recommendation? Because we do hear, and Paul, we were talking about this earlier, you know, companies can be quite nervous sometimes about going to NICE recommendation, because what happens if it said it's not recommended? Does that totally kill the whole commercialization of your product? Or is it not quite that way? So can we go through each of these categories here, so the TA, MTG, DG, and IPG, and look at what the levels of recommendation are, just so the audience can understand, and then what the implications. Chris, can I hand over to you for that? And then Paul, I'll come to you.
Sure. Well, I think the most straightforward one for medical devices is with regard to medical technology guidance. And so you really have, for all the published MTGs, 3 types of recommendation. That's case supported. So the claims of benefit that you've claimed in your notification are supported by the evidence. It is recommended for use in the NHS, and the majority of MTG goes down that pathway. Around 20% of MTG goes to a research recommendation, which is meant to be positive, and it's saying to the NHS, the claims are plausible, but there's not quite enough evidence yet for NICE to make a positive. So NICE really would like to make a positive recommendation, and that was my job when I was at NICE. I used to commission research to actually fill in those gaps in evidence. Now, obviously, if someone knows what those gaps are going to be before they notify, then they can fill in those gaps. And there's a service called Meta, which is franchised by NICE. We're a Meta facilitator at Device Access. There are others available as well. And they can do gap analysis to actually find out if your evidence base is correct, because you may have RCT, randomized controlled trial level evidence, but if it doesn't answer the questions that NICE are asking in their scope, it's pointless. It'd be far better to get real world evidence, which NICE now accepts in their current methodology. Real world evidence in the NHS, pragmatic evidence, can mean more than an RCT that's on the wrong thing, if your pragmatic evidence is spot on. And then rarely, and it's only 2 medical technology guidances to date, have been case not supported. Now, those devices are still marketed in the NHS. They're still sold. So MTG, even if in the rare occasion it goes case not supported, people are still selling. So it doesn't hurt them. Looking at the others, diagnostics guidance is very similar, but diagnostics has an additional criteria saying only in research. And they've made that recommendation sometimes where they've said, really the evidence base is just not there, and we're only going to recommend this diagnostic for use in research in the NHS, and that really puts more of an onus on the company to generate higher levels of evidence than would be a minded yes that you would get from diagnostics, or a totally positive yes, and they too have made a couple of not supported conclusions. IPG will normally say positive. The surgical procedure with the use of this device is supported, or they can say special arrangements, and special arrangements mean that NICE guidance can still be produced on a named technology, but audit and special consent have to be obtained in the NHS for the use of that device. So that's actually a great way of collecting audit clinical data, so that you can actually build up your evidence base while meeting the requirements of a special arrangements IPG. But several companies have said to me in the past, Chris, we got IPG 5 years ago, but that hasn't helped our sales. I think what's very important here, IPG is just a stage gate that you have to go through for certain technologies. It doesn't carry a mandate. It doesn't actually carry a recommendation to purchase the technology. It just means the surgical procedure is considered to be appropriate. And IPG can say no. In the event that IPG says no, that actually does stop the surgical procedure in the UK. You're not supposed to do an interventional procedure. If IPG have said no, you should not do that surgical procedure. So that is a negative thing, but there would have to be very severe safety concerns for that to happen. It would mean there is really a big problem there. And that's something that can be addressed, and you can go back to IPG. TA is very linked with the funding mandate that Paul mentioned. If you get a positive TA, then you're supposed to get a positive funding mandate within 3 months of the guidance being produced. Normally for a medical device, this means it has to be on the high cost tariff exempt device list, but that's not always the case, but it's normally the case for a medical device. Whereas with a drug, there's mandated funding for a drug. And with TA, if TA say no, then in the case of drugs, then that means that drug cannot be sold to the NHS. If they say case not supported, basically TA has also that negative factor. With devices, it's variable. It depends on the name, whether it's a named device, and some named devices have found it difficult to sell because of a negative TA, but there are relatively few device TAs compared with, say, MTGs.
But I think, so you spoke a little bit earlier about the research recommendation, and that can be funded. Paul, is that funded through NICE, or that would have to be funded through the company?
That would have to be funded through the company. NICE doesn't fund any research. Chris, in his old job, used to do everything but fund research. He used to facilitate, commission. That was one of his functions of the research commissioning, that we said we knew medical device manufacturers tend to not have the limitless funds that drug companies do. So we set that function up, and we do still do some of that. We would encourage you, we'll direct you to places, but we wouldn't fund the research, and we will relook at the guidance if you have further evidence. So we'll take that forward and relook at it to see if you gather further evidence to get a positive outcome. We tend not to we don't take up technologies in order to disinvest in them. We would never select a technology if we didn't think this could do some good in the NHS, and hopefully we could produce positive guidance. So we don't do deliberately negative outputs. We're always looking to get innovative new technologies to get into the NHS to benefit patients. So really, when you come into the topic selection oversight panel, that's the stage where you'll see how much evidence you have, if you have the correct amount of evidence, and then if you go through, or also working with companies like Device Access to then really prepare correctly. So how, Mike, how do companies make sure they prepare correctly? Because, from a marketing perspective, you see, yes, if I get a MedTech guidance, I show that I'm cost effective and I'm clinically effective for the patients. So this changes the conversation in the NHS, which is hugely beneficial. But what if the risks, if I obviously don't get through, how can I prepare myself correctly so that I'm in a good position to get what I need?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly our craft. That's what we've been doing for 11 years, really, and learning from every evaluation that we've done. And we've helped over 50 now through all of these programs, actually all of these programs now, because as Paul indicated, we do have something going through on TA at the moment. But I think that it's, it is complicated, this, and but it's about really trying to pitch so that that our technologies that we work and we champion with our clients do get selected with topic selection, and making sure that we show that the technology is one that's going to help NICE win as well, because NICE have got to do, I mean, how many, Paul, a year do you have to do of MedTech guidance? Is it 10 or 15 or?
Yes,
sure.
Currently 12.
Yeah,
that's what we're able to do in 47 MedTech innovation briefings. Right.
So it's quite a lot of work there, but they've got to get on and do these as well. And it's quite difficult to find. What we're finding is that so many companies go off and bring their technologies into the country and then start showing them to doctors that want to do studies, and they go off and do the studies. And then we realize that the studies aren't what NICE are looking for, but they're what the doctor wants. And that's one of the big things that we've been doing is having quite difficult conversations with companies saying, look, your evidence does not match the claims. And Chris, whilst he was at NICE, wrote a paper which is available, which talks about the importance of clear and relevant evidence matching the claims. And the big thing, one of the most incredible things that I find, that companies go to NICE with them saying that their product's cheaper, and that's why the NHS are going to buy it, and thinking that's what's going to convince NICE, but so few of them do proper modelling and don't know what modelling is really needed, because there's different modelling depending on the different programs. So having for example, a published model would certainly help support some parts of the NHS in showing that a technology is affordable, and NICE do listen carefully to what patients think, and that's another thing that many companies forget to show that their technology has had some very good positive outcomes for the patients. And NICE are very interested in talking to patient groups and charities and getting that sort of feedback. So I suppose the biggest areas where we see companies not preparing properly for NICE is the wrong evidence, wrong endpoints, thinking it needs to be a randomized control study, not involving patients, not having long-term patient outcome, PROM data, which can be very helpful to convince NICE, particularly with the interventional procedure program, which are very interested in the safety and efficacy, and making sure we don't get a repeat of what's happened previously with certain technologies going through NICE and then finding out that they've not worked properly or may have caused harm for patients, which is the last thing that NICE want to be involved in. So there's my points. Is be prepared, talk to us, we're happy to help, but it's not simple, but on the other side of it, that NICE are very interested in new technologies. They need to look at more of them, and there's very big companies out there that we know of that have incredible evidence on their technologies, but don't talk to NICE. They've done all the research, and it's like, well, why are you doing this research? Who is it for? Is it for the doctor so you can present it in a nice conference in Miami? Is it what is it all about? Why are you doing this evidence? You should be thinking about what the payer wants, what the HTA body wants, and produce the evidence to support those claims. And it's something that many companies just don't seem to do. So that's my view.
Okay.
Over to you.
Add something to that as well.
Yeah.
I think Mike's right there. People do the data, and then they do think about it from a conference point of view. And I hear a lot of the time is, I really want this data to be right because I'm going to a show in January or a show in March and things like that. I do think that is thinking about things short-sightedly, because a lot of doctors, when they go to these events, there is an element of trust there. They need to make sure they trust the company. And you hear a lot of them saying, well, you've just shown me the best part of the data. And they don't necessarily believe the data being shown to them at a conference. Whereas if it goes through NICE, that they don't need to build a level of trust with NICE. They trust NICE already. They know that NICE has done the work. So if you have this fantastic data, that's the safest place to put it, to make sure that people buy into it and believe it and know that your device does what you're saying it does.
It's really a stamp saying that, yes, this evidence is accurate and validated.
Yeah.
that's one of the things I sometimes say, that when you come to NICE, you get very high quality, quality assured marketing material, although we wouldn't call it marketing material, we would call it advice for the NHS, but that's what it is. It's very high quality and quite dry sometimes. We don't talk marketing speak, but it has a massive impact on NHS practitioners when you say NICE has said this.
Yes, and the other benefit, actually, when we look at the medical technology guidance, if a product does go through that route, it is on a single product and it is on a named product. So from a marketing perspective, that's absolutely fantastic, because what you're saying when you go through medical technologies guidance is that my product is cost effective and clinically effective to patients in the NHS. And it's only my product compared to standard of care. So it's hugely powerful when it comes to a marketing plan. So how do I know if my technology is right? So people on the call now, they might think, right, my technology could be nice for right for NICE. How do they know? How do they validate that? And what's the next step they need to take?
You could come and talk to us, but we can't give direct answers, strangely, Claudia. We do have a fee-paying service, NICE Scientific Advice, which will give you direct answers. But companies often come and say, right, we're not sure about how we approach a CE mark, or we're not sure, should we do this trial or that trial? And I can't advise you on that. You would have to go to somebody like Mike, who can prepare all that. We can sort of answer sort of negatively and say, well, I wouldn't do that, but we can't give that sort of advice unless you pay one of our fee-paying outputs. So the best idea would be to maybe go to somebody like Mike who can get you iron all those things out, and rather than doing it by trial and error and coming to us and being rejected and coming to us, we're happy to look at anything at any time, but the better prepared you are, the faster you will get through the NICE process.
Yes. And so, Mike, if companies come to you, you would then have a look at all their clinical data, what clinical data they have, basically the gap analysis, to then see this is what you need to do if you want to go through an effective NICE guidance route.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I think that, well, we have been, as Chris mentioned earlier, a MedTech early technical assessment facilitator, a MetaTool facilitator. Actually, we were the first company that I believe got that ability to offer that service when NICE launched Meta back in 2016. It was some time ago, but that's good, but it does require quite a lot of work from the company, because what they're having to do is actually go through a mini HTA. They have to answer all the questions, and there's quite a number of them. And what's interesting when you do Meta is that you can be really surprised at how little the companies know about the NHS, or what difference their device is going to make, or whether it's cost saving, cost incurring, what classification it is, what is the standard of care, what are the comparators. It is incredible. And I was in sales for 20 years, and I launched all sorts of great things in the NHS, and as salespeople, as marketing people, we do go out and we're very much this is the best thing, and we're all fired up, but some fundamental questions aren't they just can't answer them, and it's incredible. And of course, with the NHS having so much data, I mean, we sit on 1.3 billion NHS patient records with our license to HES, which we've had since 2014. So, we're able to look at how the NHS are treating certain conditions. We're able to understand, what the impact is to the patient, to the hospital, to the payer, how much those episodes cost. Do these patients come back? Are there readmissions? Complications, length of stay, all of these things that we're very, very privileged to have in this healthcare system that we all engage with, that very, very few other healthcare systems in the world have. So truly understanding the problem it's going to solve is important. But the other product that we've started, which is we do the heavy lifting, is a product called the Initial Product Assessment, or an IPA, which is a new product that we've developed with Chris joining us from NICE earlier this year, and I'll get Chris to talk about the differences of Meta and the IPA service, because I think that's a quicker way of helping answer that question. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, and I think it's to understand what the options are, so that how would somebody actually start to access this service.
Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely. So Paul mentioned NICE Scientific Advice and OMAR, the Office for Market Access. These are really excellent services that NICE provide as fee-paying services. What we offer is a bespoke service. So it's not generic. It's actually tailored to the requirements of your device and your company. So what's different from Meta is that we provide business advice as well, bolted on to the evaluation of the evidence and the economic evidence. And that is the sort of one-stop approach. So we're providing a shop that provides the lot. And really, I think the benefit to the company is efficiency of scale. By coming to us, and there are other market access companies, but the reason I joined Device Access when I left NICE is because Device Access have got the best track record with regard to getting technologies in for medical devices and actually getting things through to MedTech funding mandate, which is the funding mandate that bolts onto medical technology and diagnostics guidance for selected technologies with a positive. So I saw that as the future. That's where things need to be. So we optimize that. We are maximizing the opportunity of actually getting a positive selection decision at TSOP, getting a MedTech innovation briefing if you're not fast tracked and you don't need one, and then going to the correct program as fast as possible. And also it's advising the company how to present their evidence, because when I joined NICE, it was very flattering because they said we only recruit the best, and that is the case for NICE. There's an amazing selection process, very, very highly qualified people, often PhDs, working in the field. But you've got to make their job as easy as possible. They're looking at a lot of technology. So you send them a lot of 3D graphics, animations and things. It doesn't necessarily help the NICE analyst burrow down to where are the facts. Where is the evidence to match the claims of benefit? And this is what we do. We actually match the evidence to the claims of benefit, and we direct the company to where the gaps are precisely and say, you need to be collecting some real world data in the NHS. And here's the NICE method, and the evidence standards framework, for example, shows you exactly what you need to collect. But it's having the knowledge of where to look on the NICE website and where to look for other details, and also looking at past NICE guidances to look for good examples. And that's what I do with the initial product assessment. I'm looking at the technology as a bespoke item, and also with regard to the economics. Generic economics are looking at the benefit to the NHS. We can also look at the benefit to the company. What is the correct value driver? What is the correct value proposition for the company, in order that they're not a charity, they're a business making money? So obviously one has to make a reasonable profit, but we make sure people also make a reasonable profit while also benefiting the NHS and the patient. So it's all a balance to actually make sure that it's worth taking the journey in the first place. Because some companies, when you actually look at the economic evidence, reluctantly, we have to say, sorry, at the moment, you don't have it. You don't have a model where you can actually make money and also bring benefit to the NHS. And that's a very difficult conversation, but that's the one that we can do in private, and then advise people where they need to go in order to maybe redirect their product to actually get that sweet spot that NICE can accept. And the other thing is to really make it easy for NICE to break down the evidence, because if you simply present a load of a bibliography that's incomplete, a poor literature search, NICE have to do all of that heavy lifting, and they have to get all the papers and all that stuff. We can advise on how to maximize the impact to the NICE analysts who are actually doing the hard work to actually bring it through fast. So in other words, which papers do you need to send NICE copyright cleared to actually make sure that NICE get the message and can then circulate that evidence to the committee most effectively? Because quite often companies just say, just go and look it up like the rest of us have to. And that's not necessarily the best strategy when you're trying to get NICE on your side, because it takes time. If you're giving the analysts so much information up front that they can use immediately, then they've got more thinking time. They've got more time to actually deliberate. And also the committee would love it more because they don't have to break down much complex information. They've got it straightforward, very clear, black text on a white background. And that's really, as Paul was saying, NICE really break it down. They make it simple. So it's the opposite of classic marketing. It's actually bringing it down to a scientific level, because most of NICE's staff are scientists, professional scientists who need to see it in that way. Then after you've got the NICE guidance, then you can really hit the marketing and do the fancy graphics and all of that sort of stuff. That's the correct time to do that. But NICE don't need to see that. And it does detract from the message.
Yeah. So you talk about the data. What type of data is required? Because I know we just had a question that actually Paul has answered online. But is systematic reviews required? What type level of evidence do companies need to have before they even approach device access?
Mike's got his hand up, but I'm happy to take that first, Mike, if that's okay. Thank you. Well, different programs at NICE need different levels of evidence. So medical technology guidance has always prided itself on being able to look at grey literature. So really, as long as it's published somewhere and has had some kind of peer review, even conference abstracts that have been refereed are acceptable as evidence if there's nothing else. Other programs like clinical guidelines need systematic reviews, often with meta-analysis. Now, actually seeing those for medical devices is rare, but it does happen occasionally. And obviously, that's the highest level of evidence. You don't have to have that. If you've got it, that's fantastic, as long as the meta-analysis supports your claims of benefit. So it's a rare thing to actually have made the claim of benefit and then go away and do the systematic review with meta-analysis and end up with a forest plot that is on the side of the claim that you're making. If you've got that, absolutely, you've hit the target. Perfect. But it's so rare to actually get that because you get deviation to either side within the trial and people actually look at the wrong thing. As Paul said, quite often, the thing the clinician wants, not necessarily the thing that NICE wants, or was that Mike? But so I would say good quality evidence that's pragmatic. You don't have to have RCT level evidence. It's great if you've got it and it matches the claim to benefit, but pragmatic work at the coalface in the NHS ideally, but if not in another healthcare system that has equivalence to the NHS is great, actually showing that the claims of benefit are matched by the evidence for that particular claim. But as you've said on your slides, this has to match your instructions for use for your device. So you can't be bending the case and going off the approved regulatory path. You've got to stick to that because NICE will look at that. They'll look at the instructions for use. They'll look at the CE mark. So you can't be notifying something to NICE that's different from your actual marketing approval.
Becca, you put your hand up. Did you take your hand down again?
No, I didn't. I just put it up and just around. I think there's a common theme on all of these things that we talk about data, and it's about making sure the data is right for the claim that you're making, and it comes up all the time. And I think sometimes what companies are missing is everyone sitting in a room together at the very beginning and saying, what is it that our device does? What information do we want to be able to say in our marketing when we go to NICE? And that conversation is really important because without that conversation, you spend millions of pounds on clinical data or collecting clinical data that at the end of the day, you can't use. You can't use for your marketing because it doesn't match your intended purpose. You can't use for your NICE application because it doesn't match your intended purpose. And it's something that can be prevented if that conversation happens up front. Like, what is our claim? What are we actually trying to say about our device?
Mike?
Yeah, I was going to say, just gone on about just the work that we do and Chris does. The difference between Meta and the initial product assessment that we do is that Chris does do full-blown search on Embase and Medline and reads the full text as well. Chris doesn't read abstracts and so behaves in the same way as NICE. So, which is important. We're not just saying. We're making sure that we've got the right evidence there, and then it's on the back of these studies and the way that these companies behave in running studies without knowing what NICE or other payers want is disastrous because it costs money, and these companies are often small startup companies with limited funds, and we see them getting funded, but unfortunately, and I've seen this a little bit too often where companies have run off and done the wrong studies and the companies have gone into a lot of financial difficulty. And at the end of the day, and I've said this so many times, the biggest winners and losers in this game of medtech are patients and investors. And that's the reality of it, really. And the journeys these companies go on with research and the time it takes them to do it when they could accelerate it they know about the new real world evidence frameworks from NICE? Do they know there's other ways of getting evidence? Do they know there's ways of tracking patients? We work really closely with an organization called Dendrite Clinical Systems, who are able to send messages to patients, and patients give the feedback of the device following the implantation or following the treatment, and that can go on for months, weeks and years. And that sort of assurance that NICE and the NHS are using technologies that benefit patients and are durable and are long-term effective is great, because these sort of demonstration through data that your device has made a difference, and going back retrospectively and saying to the NHS, look, 2 years ago you're using this treatment, we've now introduced this treatment, look at your length of stay, look at how fewer readmissions are happening. Oh, and sorry, by the way, we're having to put our price up a bit because we put a lot of investment in, and we want to be paid appropriately for bringing this thing to market. I mean, these conversations can happen, but you can't do them if you don't have the evidence.
And I think that's really important when you say that if you don't have the evidence. And to what Becca said as well, you really need to start very early on. So, when we say, when should you start even thinking about NICE? And I'll come on to the final question shortly, which is what impact does it have on the marketing strategy, which is really the whole topic of the webinar. But in order to get your clinical data, you really need to start thinking about this right at the start of your intended purpose when your device comes to market, and then see NICE as part of your development pathway and part of your clinical development plan. Because once you have the right data, then you get the stamp of approval, as Paul, you said, from NICE, saying, yes, it is validated. And suddenly that puts you in a very powerful position, not only in the UK, but also internationally. And actually, that's another question we've had come up. And Paul, I'll direct this to you. What is the impact of NICE internationally? Is it just UK?
No, I mean, our all our outputs are aimed at the NHS in England and Wales. Officially, that's why we produce guidance. But we know for a fact that some of these technologies, when we produce guidance on them, it has a massive effect across the EU and especially in the US as well. A lot of insurance co-payment systems around the world will look at what NICE says and will say, right, if NICE have said that, then that will have an impact. I was talking to somebody recently from the Ukraine, and they say it has a massive impact. They may not mention it, but they will know that if somebody at NICE says something, then that will have an impact on what they will fund and what direction their technology is going. And I think Mike had an example of one of the technologies that he brought through us. I think that company was bought out in the US, and I think Mike thinks that the fact that they got positive MTG and they got uptake within the UK had a big impact on that company around the world, because our outputs are very, very high quality, and they are trusted by lots of different organizations. And we do collaborate around the world as well. We collaborate with Canada, the US, and across the EU.
So the benefits internationally, when we talk about marketing strategy, I think that ties very well actually into the impact on marketing strategy. And Becca, I'll ask everybody about this as well. But I think when we're looking at marketing strategy and NICE recommendation, it is a part of your journey of your device. It has to be fitted into your product life cycle. But if you have, a very well structured clinical development plan, and you can differentiate your product in the market to show clinical superiority or clinical difference, and then NICE stamps that, suddenly you're changing the entire conversation within the NHS and within other countries. So as we said before, no longer are you having to talk to every individual hospital NHS trust about the benefits of your device. NICE has already approved this. So the impact on your marketing strategy are ginormous, but it doesn't come overnight. It has to be thought about right at the beginning. It has to be thought about early. And if you are a later stage company now and you want to start looking through NICE, just make sure you have the gap analysis, so you know actually what position you're sitting in now. So then, if Device Access do provide the dossier pool to you, at least this is something, it's in a way that can be processed very simply by NICE. Is there?
I think NICE, Mike's results speak for themselves. He brought a lot of technologies through to us, and we have taken them all the way through to guidance output. So, working with Mike has been a real pleasure, because he does bring us very well structured portfolios of evidence that we can take straight through to an output.
I think the other really important thing that, Paul, you've said today as well, and Chris, you've said, is that it's not you go into a NICE program and you don't get guidance and off you go. There's actually an awful lot of support within this process. So when people are concerned that actually you go through NICE and it'll damage the commercial viability of your product, that's just not the case. Because actually there's a lot of processes that you go through to work together collaboratively to make sure that your device has the evidence that it needs. And if it doesn't, that'll be discussed up front as well. So really, it's a very beneficial thing to approach NICE device access to see where you sit if you have an innovative device.
Yes, and if I may reiterate, the topic selection oversight panel is totally confidential. So if you go into TSOP for topic selection and you don't get it for whatever reason, you will be advised of the reason why that happened. And that's been happening for all the years that the MedTech programs have existed at NICE. And one of the papers that I helped to write as technical author was looking at those selection decisions or non-selection decisions. And it's then the time to go away and say, okay, that's not a negative thing. NICE have told us what to do. And then go back to NICE. And there's no limit to the amount of times you can re-notify as long as you've addressed the questions. And that's totally confidential. So that's no risk. It's not as if you're being exposed in public as a company that's not been selected. That's kept totally confidential. And the majority of technologies that get notified to NICE don't get selected, but it's totally confidential, so nobody knows. So I think that's an important point. It's a no risk strategy. And it is that collaboration that you're talking about, that it is that two-way conversation with NICE and also with people like us at Device Access to guide you. Because one of the problems I have as an MedTech inventor is I didn't want to give up my technology. I didn't want to give it to other people to generate the evidence. I wanted to generate the evidence myself. But that's the worst thing you can often do. The inventor has inherent bias, especially if the inventor is going to get a yacht at the end of the day as a result of selling the technology. So the idea is you move the inventor away to one side, give them a yacht, and then collect the evidence independently. And then it doesn't have that inherent pecuniary bias that NICE do notice. They do reference this and they say, well, actually the inventor's done all the evidence. That's not necessarily the best thing, but you need to take advice on that and actually hopefully move it to an independent evidence generation network and then get the results that NICE can use.
And actually find out your gaps as well. Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I should add, all our services are free apart from technology appraisal. So technology appraisal do charge for their output. Yeah. All the others at the moment are free of charge. And you can come back to topic selection as many times as you like. It's not a negative thing that if we say a no, we will always tell you why we said no as well. So if we say come back when you've got a CE mark or come back when you've got a study on X, Y, or Z, we will always re-look at that decision if we think we've made the decision incorrectly. Obviously, it does involve your time, so that would be a cost, but everything else is provided free of charge.
But I think if you believe your device has significant benefits and it's addressing a large population of a market, or maybe not even the case, depending on what it is, then it's definitely very worthwhile approaching NICE because of the benefits that can hold if you do get recommendations through the MedTech guidance program from a marketing perspective.
Absolutely. Sometimes it focuses the mind as well to come to NICE when we say, actually, you've got lots of evidence, but it's just not in the right place. It's lovely evidence, but it's not it doesn't match what you're claiming to us. So it is, a lot of companies find it a really useful exercise just to go through and discuss with us, and then they can come back in a few years' time.
I've got one final question. I know we're reaching the time now. We've answered most of the questions, all of the questions. How long does it take to go through NICE?
We're trying to get faster and faster. We're doing lots of things faster and faster. MedTech innovation briefings take about 4 or 5 months. Guidance takes between 1 and 2 years. The better prepared you are, the likelihood the faster you'll go through, because sometimes we deal with technologies that have to come through topic selection 2, 3, 4 times. That could have been much more sped up if you came to us with the right message at the start. Yes. So I would say if you come to us tomorrow, I would expect you to get, if you've got all the evidence and goes all the way through the system, within about 2 years, you probably have guidance, perhaps less, perhaps a year for some of the programs. And we are trialing some very new programs now that are going to hopefully go much faster than that.
which is the EVA program, which we were going to talk about, and we've slightly run out of time, but we can do that another time maybe. Excellent. So
there's a really good page on the website, Claudia. If
yes,
somebody
there
wants
is.
to know about EVA, do type EVA at the NICE website. That will take you to a page to describe it.
No problem. And we'll put that in the notes as well underneath the webinar. That's fine. So I've got really a quick fire question for each of you before we go. I'll start with Mike. Mike, what is the one biggest reason from a marketing perspective companies should consider NICE?
Well, I always differentiate between marketing and market access, and marketing being product, price, place, promotion. It's a great thing. It gets people focused, but market access is ensuring that ensuring that the technology benefits patients, benefits the second P, which is the provider of care. The third P of market access is the payer of care. And the last P is the company, and that's product and profit. And I think that NICE helped to basically pull all that together, the principles of marketing, principles of market access, all together to show that the device is worth buying and should be used on patients. So that's
which then hugely impacts your marketing strategy, because you can make those claims with certainty that you have the rubber stamp of NICE.
Yeah, and then use Podymos to get the message out, because you're really good at that. And
thanks, Mike.
Claudia and the team we've been working closely with for a long time, and you're very good at articulating that, because you're focused on turning that conversation, instead of a glossy picture saying they come in a box of 10, if you buy 2 we'll give you 1 free and all the other stuff. It's really you're the way you communicate, and you help those companies to communicate those benefits in your marcoms is great. So
but I think NICE is hugely powerful to us for that as well. Exactly. So this is why I'm so keen on everybody to understand NICE and the power, because it really allows us to make claims with confidence, which is hugely powerful. Paul, I'll come to you next.
I think NICE can give you the most high quality, value added ammunition for your marketing strategy. Yes. It becomes a question of why wouldn't you use this, rather than why would you buy our technology. It becomes why wouldn't you. Here is proof that it has a positive impact on the NHS, on patients. It's cost effective. It's a sort of no-brainer that the NHS, or whichever healthcare facility you're selling your technologies to, obviously ours just applies to the NHS, but it becomes a no-brainer decision that you should be using this in your healthcare facility. It's some of the best marketing ammunition in the world, I suppose. Yes. A nice output.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Becca, I'll come to you, and then Chris, I'll come to you finally.
I think, touching on what Paul said there, is the trust that you get with NICE, that, your data has been looked at independently and has been verified as matching your claims. And I think that rubber seal of approval is, it's invaluable really, and should be searched for.
Chris?
I'd say it's the stamp of approval from a government-funded UK arm's-length public body. You can't get better endorsement.
And it is compared to standard of care in the majority of instances. So you are actually saying that you provide benefits over the current standard of care.
And if I may add to that, yes. You're actually becoming the standard of care. If Lovely. You get a positive NICE guidance, you become the standard of care de facto.
That's fantastic. No, I agree. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for all your input today on the panel. I've really appreciated your time and the discussion. If anybody has any other questions they would like answered, please send them to us, and we'll ask the panel if they would kindly answer them in the future, and then we'll send them out to everybody. This webinar will also be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll also be putting it out on LinkedIn and sending it out on an email, just so that if anybody wants to review it later, they can do that at their own time. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any last comments from anyone on the panel.
Thanks, Claudia. Thanks, Mike, for inviting me. Really positive experience. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone has a great day.
And you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.